Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Design Dialogues hosted by Rethinking the Future in collaboration with Fublis. This is your host, Bhavya, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Vikas Dilawari, the founder and principal architect of Vikas Dilawari Conservation Architects. With 30 years of experience, Vikas Dilawari Architects specializes in architecture, conservation, urban design, and interior design. Their award winning projects span historic homes, educational institutions, and cultural landmarks, including the restoration of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya in Mumbai. Led by renowned conservation architect Vikas Dilawari, they collaborate with top consultants to preserve heritage while delivering innovative design solutions. Thank you for joining us, Vikas. So, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So, before starting the questions, I would like you to inform that this interview will be published on the website of Fublis. And so, sign up on the Fublis website and you'll get the access to watch this interview. So, shall we proceed with the questions?
Yes, please.
So, first question for the day. Can you describe your design philosophy and how it has evolved over the past 3 decades in your work and across conservation and architecture?
More than design philosophy, it's more of conservation philosophy which we follow because I design very little, but I conserve more of other people's creation. Depending upon the project, the philosophy revolves and rotates. We try to conserve with the intent that we will do minimum intervention. We will respect the original person's creation for which it is important and significant, and the very fact that it is heritage now. The third is something which is most important is how to integrate the present day needs and the services to meet the present day standards, because what you're dealing is not monuments but are lived in buildings. So what we try to do is we try to wear the shoes that if the original architect would have been alive and with this present technology, what he would have got, how would have he integrated the same thing? We try to do that. So these are the small, pointers which determine. And yeah, the fourth or the fifth one would is to make it as economical as one can, because if it's economical, then people will go ahead with conservation as a larger movement rather than individual buildings. And there's one more important component to it, which of late I've not been able to follow. But initially, in the first 2 decades of my practice, that was a very important component, which is to revive lost art and traditions. So now what you're finding is more the projects are contractor driven rather than artist driven. That's because of the nature of the projects, how people want it. But that's the philosophy.
That's really nice. So, next question. Can you walk us through your typical project workflow, especially when working on a culturally significant building?
Yeah. So what we do is, sorry, when we are approached to do a conservation project, we always insist that we would share our observations, findings, and our philosophy in a small kind of a monograph, which is called the Fabric Status Report, where we identify the cultural significance of the particular building, and we spell out what are the defects and we give recommendations for it. And of course, it has some broad costing. So if the client is on the same page with us, we then go further. And when we start working further, we normally prepare BOQs, tenders. We try to keep the process as transparent by inviting all the tenderers to be present during tender opening. So this is there. And when the work starts, we practically go there twice a week. One meeting is with the clients, with the contractors, with the stakeholders. And there is one meeting which happens normally on a Saturday, which is just a review meeting to see whether the work is proceeding as scheduled or not. This is personally my involvement, but my team and other people also follow it up rigorously. And there's a WhatsApp group where every information is shared with everyone.
That's really nice. So, what were the biggest challenges you have faced in balancing the preservation of historical elements with modern functionality during the restoration of the Yacht Club?
So specifically, if you're talking of Yacht Club, yeah, it's a century-old club. Things have changed. Earlier, it was designed so as to rely on natural ventilation, but now with the traffic noise and with everyone preferring air conditioning, The air conditioning plays a very important component to it. So we try to work out things which are designed sensitively. The present day services are integrated in such a manner which will not disturb the overall ambience. So that was one challenge. The other challenge was to also to because it was modified and repaired. Earlier there used to be bathtubs, but now no longer people prefer to be on use bathtubs. At that time, it was meant because it's a timber building. It really served a good purpose. But now things have changed, so we have to design the decor and other things which will match with the historic ambience of that place. So all these attempts have been tried. I think the major challenges is to execute the work, to do the structural repairs with help of good contractors, and to integrate the services in a live functional building. So that's where the challenges are, because you don't get the building vacant at any time.
That's true. That's absolutely true. So, apart from that, what key takeaways or lessons you have taken from this project that you would apply to other heritage restoration efforts of yours?
Well, if you plan it very systematically, how you're going to execute the project in phases, I think that's something which I've learned. Because sometimes wishfully thinking, we hope that the whole project will take off in one go. It doesn't happen. So, and you have to always learn that we do have monsoons, and the monsoons are very unpredictable. So you always have two or three work fronts, so that if the monsoon happens, they can do the internal work and without disturbing the rest of the people, and how the other works can happen. So the main thing is, how do you phase the work? How do you get it executed? And of late, I've just realized that if you have larger works, you can scatter it out into smaller portions and give it to two, three people, so that there is a good, healthy competition which is going on. And the clients also get the efficiency which they want.
It's really nice. So, what do you and how do you envision the future conservation architecture, and what trends do you think will shape your heritage restoration in coming years?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you the truth. The whole conservation movement has shifted from doing minimum intervention, and it is now slightly getting oriented towards beautification and doing maximum intervention.
Of
Because the
course.
day it becomes a contractor driven thing, the focus shifts there.
Yeah.
So that is a matter of really concern. And second, what you really find sometimes, many of the government projects, conservation comes along with redevelopment. The two are diagrammatically opposite to one another, and the two cannot be clubbed together. But when you have projects which talks of redevelopment and conservation, so you really wonder how things will happen. So these are some major challenges. We used to have charters, but of late the charters are also, what is appropriate is also going, because it's driven by the market needs and other things. Just to cite an example, historic buildings look best with lighting which is very subtle, but with the multicolor lights, everyone is going for it. Now this is where, it's something like commercial cinema and theaters. Theaters, very less people like it. Commercial cinema is what the masses like. So to do a balance between the two, that's the tricky part, because when the client tells you you want multicolor lights, and you want to tell him, look, no, the subtle lights are best. That's where I think the younger generations will either find it easy to do it as a part of it, or at least I'm having difficulties to cope up with that.
I think that is also going to be a lesson for the future architects, that there's a difference between what an architect does and what a builder and what a commercial type of work people do. I think that's the fine line that future architects must, envision themselves to do. So
Yeah, so
moving
that's
on.
the reason I told you that that's a tricky question, because
Of course.
you
Yeah.
you have left many projects because you didn't want to compromise on
Yeah.
your stand. You're an architect, you're a professional, you
Yeah.
would want the best for the building, but it's not necessarily that you have to follow everything which is the brief.
But I think it's also important to put a light on it nowadays for the younger generation to feel and realize like what is right and what is wrong. So I think
Yeah,
thanks to you for doing this and saying in front of everybody for them to realize.
yeah. but I can understand their struggle because they
Yeah.
need to get breaks and they need to get projects going on for the sustainers.
Yeah.
So anyway, but
That's
interesting question.
absolutely. Yeah, that's the valid point. So yeah, what strategies do you use to engage the public and stakeholders during the restoration of your heritage sites?
Yeah, let me be frank. When you're asking this question, the stakeholders basically are the users
Yeah.
or the clients. Sometimes the user and clients can be different, but we basically deal with clients. And as I told you that when you prepare the report, you are spelling out your philosophy. So
Hmm.
sometimes we have to do something which is called the least bad compromise because you can't do the best solution possible, but you have to compromise. So you try to do the least bad compromise. Many a times, like I'm talking specifically, this was with the museum, the Prince of Wales Museum or the CSMVS, where they wanted to air condition two galleries, but a large fan could help have solved the purpose. It was energy conservation. It was more suitable for the artifact. So we put forward this thing. There was a lot of deliberation between all stakeholders, and we arrived at it. So these are a few things. I'm fortunate that you've got very good clients who are sympathetic and who understands. So that's half the things are done when you have very good clients who are understanding and are cooperative.
That's really nice. And I think you've been lucky also with the lot of hard work you have done. So that's really great. So moving on to the next question, what conservation strategies were employed to ensure the long-term durability of your Dr. Bhau Daji Lad Museum?
Yeah, so Dr. Bhau Daji Lad Museum, I've got a chance to work twice on it.
Yeah.
One was in 2003 to 2008 when it was inaugurated. Then there was an intermittent phase where services had to be integrated, climate controls and things like that. And also the plaza was done. And now this one is a slightly different one because earlier it was a PPP model with Mrs. Tasneem Mehta heading the whole project. Now it is a BMC project, so we are approaching it from there. And again, as I said to you, the brief is preventive maintenance. So what we try to do is we try to see that you do good maintenance, do minimum intervention, and try to prolong the life of the building. So the same philosophies which I mentioned earlier, we try to follow, and with this, we are doing it. So it's a challenging one to do it in the BMC format with that kind of a thing, but we are doing well.
Another learning I got from the way you were speaking that you're very, really confident about your philosophy and your values and you stand by it during your projects. I really like it.
You have to stand. It affects you financially, but
Yeah,
I think it's worth it in the end because at least you can sleep, very comfortably.
of course, of course. So could you elaborate on the climate control solutions implemented in the galleries to preserve those exhibits?
Yeah, so this was in 2012. There were likely chances of international exhibitions which would have happened. So one had to be extremely careful. How do you integrate 24 by 7 air conditioning and other climate controls? Now, air conditioning becomes very tricky because if you want to do that, you need to have a backup. Because the when the museum is shut, it will still work in the night, and you should have a spare machine and things like that, and then electricity should not go off. So whether how do you manage with that? So it is a very complicated process, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of arguments, and then finally we achieved in doing and solving the air conditioning using VRF, which was very trendy at that time, with spare VRF kept there. They did have couple of exhibitions, and of course with the help of curators, and it's a great teamwork of the curators, the conservators, and everyone. We could arrive at solutions.
So what advice would you offer young architects who are interested in working in conservation of heritage architecture?
That be passion. If you're passionately involved with it, you'll find your way out, and you'll stick to your guns. If you see it as a profession, yes, but if you see it as a business, there's a fine line which will divide the two, and you'll have to take your call based on this. It's a very interesting field. If you can, I would suggest that before you join conservation, you should have at least 1 or 2 years experience how to build. because if you know how to build, you'll know how to repair. There are people who are just specializing straight, like how I did it initially, but I was fortunate that I did a good, 4 to 5 years internship with Ved Sagan and learned a lot about the projects. So if you work with someone initially, learn the art and then go about with it, there's a bright future. There's so much of heritage. And yes, the most interesting thing is you learn from this past. And the best thing I would be, which I could not do, but I regret, if I can get a chance, I would love to do, is to use it in contemporary practice. The good old, either the details, the philosophy, or the materials, provided you get someone to really sponsor these things. So there is a very this thing, because as social scientists, architects are responsible to revive arts and crafts, and that's the lifeline of our and our country is blessed to have the best craftsmen.
That's really nice. That's, I think, one of the good advices. Also, I remember when we were an architecture student, we used to study about you, like one of those architects, very niche architects. Conservation architecture is not such a common field, so you get to know few people who are in there. Some of you, some of the person I know, like you, it had done a great job in the field. So congratulations on that, and thank you for the advice. I
Yeah,
think the
but having
audience.
said this, I should give a slight anecdote which my wife says. When I was getting married, she says, "What do you do?" I said, "I do conservation." So she said, "Is your future in ruins?"
Okay, that's the younger generation with their memes, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the last question for the day. What
yeah.
role do you believe project documentation and publication play in today's architecture landscape? Could you share a particularly challenging project you have undertaken that was thoroughly documented and successfully published?
So it's a very interesting and a complex question. Let me put it point blankly and blunt. Most conservation architects, we do prepare drawings, but these are not measured drawings, or these are not so this thing. Measured drawings are possible when the scaffolding goes up. So we normally upgrade our drawings, which are initial drawings, and as the scaffolding goes up during the work, we do produce a good set of drawing which we hand over in the end of the project to a client. But unfortunately, I don't think the either the media or the press, either publish or cover, because no one sees the difficulties and the hardship to make this document. First, people are hesitant to spend money on doing this. If you want to make a good fabric status report, if you want to calculate right quantities, you need to have drawings. So everyone gives you one schematic plan, but there's no structural member, there's no elevations, there's no section. And if you have to sit and talk to a structural engineer, he wants to talk in terms of widths, weights, and loads and other things. So a good documentation is a very important component in conservation. I think we have a problem. Our documentation is so good in our WhatsApp group that the clients get fed up. You send 40 photographs, which are high resolution. So I'm sure they keep cleaning their WhatsApp. But unfortunately, this is not published. It's not covered with by the media. So there are projects like Flora Fountain, which was done in great meticulous detail. Mahajina Dargah, or for that matter, even CSMVS Museum, where drawings were exceptional.
I think with you speaking out on how conservation architecture is not getting recognized, that I think it will get someday. I think it will not be a niche anymore after you saying it out loud. People would get to know that there's something called conservation architecture, and people would definitely would want to pursue it. So thank you for that.
Most welcome. Thank you for
So
talking.
thank you so much for giving us your precious time today. It was a pleasure having you here, and don't forget to sign up on the Fublis website.